literally, I see the bus, I'm like, do I get out the car and make a fool of myself? I open the door and then it drives off and I'm like, cool, sit back down, let's talk to the vlog. Programming update, I have the authentication in. I'm no longer able to call the, I'm no longer able to use GraphQL, but I'm still able to get to the UI. So you basically get to the UI and then you can't do anything because everything's unauthenticated from that point on, which is problematic. It's because of where that interface is. It's not actually in the project. It's like kind of sits outside of it. So I can't apply the same authentication to it that I have the entire project, which is a problematic. I'm either going to be... It's weird because I could change the way that I add that page. And the only reason I have that page is for development purposes. It wouldn't be there in dev or live. So it seems silly changing the way that you implement something just to test it. As a general rule of thumb. So my options are essentially figure out a way to authenticate that page. Bearing in mind it's loaded, what's even harder is it's loaded in during a NuGet package as well, which is really fucking hard to do. If it was like a static HTML page, we'd have options on the table, but or select an external third-party service like Postman, for example, or SOAP UI to communicate with GraphQL instead. Postman isn't very good at it because GraphQL is quite a nuanced thing, and you can't just... We can slap a REST, a Postman style thing on top of it, but there is something else that I want to check, which is called Insomnia, and I want to try that out, which is a GraphQL Explorer, which will be good. Otherwise as well, I've downloaded a book onto my Kindle. I've got myself $100, the $100 startup, which is going to be some hashtag inspo. So this is just pulled forward, and I'm going to read my book unless my work buddy's there, and then we'll talk to him on the way into work. I am bossed in for a wee as well. It's always the rules. The more you need a wee, the less likely you are to get the bus that you want. I had to stop off at Waitrose on the way into work because I didn't think I'd make it. Damn. It seems to always be the case that if I have a wee at home before I leave, I need it more before I get to work than if I didn't. Is that normal? I've got some middleware to write today, which is going to be good fun. I'm actually at this point in my life where I'm actually spending quite a lot of time doing new things for a change. Like the GraphQL stuff at home, this middleware here. It's a bit, I almost don't know what to do. It's kind of strange having a flurry into new stuff instead of mapping data from the front end to the back end and back again. I got my middleware working. There's a minor issue where it doesn't act as I expected it would do. So I need to add in a little bit more middleware just to make sure that I manage to maintain authentication throughout the system. Otherwise, we managed to finish all the dev work for our sprint, which is pretty good going. It's either pretty good going or pretty bad going for estimating, because we were miles off. Bear in mind we finished a week early, which is a bit awkward. I've really got pins and needles in my foot as well. And otherwise we went shopping and stuff. It's Monday fun day. We are in that weird scenario though where we're queuing to go into test, but also trying to pull in more work. And if we were going into test, it'd be a little bit less. It's going to be a bit frantic, I think, towards the end of the thing. We've got problems with the environment, which is holding us up as it usually does. That's by the by. This is the hard one, boys. I really, really don't want to get up, but willpower. Probably means, obviously I've just got up, so try and be productive for as much as I can. If that doesn't work, then I change tact, do something a little bit different. One thing that isn't allowed is going back to sleep. Not until late. Nailed it, boys. I've got GraphQL all set up. It's sitting there, it's accepting requests. I have authentication, so you have to be signed in to get there. The clients and whatnot are all locked down. It's brilliant. So I've got security. I've got a stubbed mock data. What I'm now going to do is wire it into my actual service and then see if it works. I think I might have to write a little bit to copy the bearer token down into to fire it off to the microservice. I'm almost definitely going to have to do that because I need to instantiate the client. But it's going well. It's going good. We're making some significant progress. All I need to do now is actually flesh out the domain. So I'm accepting requests. I'm mapping it through to the requests that I need to do, and now I need to fire that off to my microservice and bring back the information. And then once that's proved, I can then flesh out so I cover all of the API points. Then I can integrate with my web page, my front end. Bit of a dead day. There's no beep there. I assume you're recording. Yeah. Mainly by magic, every now and again this camera just puts itself onto mute mode. Otherwise, today has been a relatively dud day. About halfway through testing something, we were just like fixing a bug for it. Then our environment went down because the database was being refreshed, which takes 16 hours, so it was down all day. It's going to be down, should be back for tomorrow. But we asked if they could do it over the weekend, and they were like, nope. We're like, well, what are we going to do now? Which limited how much development we could do. It obviously reduced testing down to 0. So that was good fun. But I managed to get my middleware running. I believe it works. I can't test every web page yet because not all the tables have come back. But I think it's working, so we'll tidy that up tomorrow. Otherwise, I've been querying queries and type models and stuff in GraphQL, and I'm figuring out how it works, basically. But I'm also probably going to have a combination of a REST API and the GraphQL, because I can, basically. One in the middleware, one in the controller, and then we'll see how that goes. It's really cool, but like I say, it's quite a mind shift from REST to GraphQL, because I'm just kind of reinventing REST in GraphQL, and that's not what you're supposed to do. So to summarise, I need to get used to defining graphs instead of defining REST APIs. I've literally just woken up, which is why I can't talk. I was going for a run, I'm doing some dinner, making some sandwiches, and then chilling, basically, until this morning, where I will fight for more GraphQL stuff. I'm living the dream. Living the dream. Also, potentially punch in some API gateway middleware, just in case. So it'll fall back to being an API gateway if it's not doing a GraphQL query. I've never queued here before. Looks like we're contesting with some kind of RTC or roadworks. We'll find out later on up this hill. Ladies and gentlemen, I have got my I've figured out how to like structure GraphQL queries. I've set it all up. It's doing everything except call the microservices at the moment. So I've still got to do all that logic, but I've now you've got to refocus on how you do it, because essentially what you have with GraphQL is a bunch of methods that you can run. So you can have those methods be whatever you want, but there's no point just making them get methods. There's no point making them get, patch, post methods, because obviously they're all posts anyway, but that style of REST method, because otherwise you may as well just do REST. There's no benefit. So I've figured out how to design the schemas and specify how the objects are all resolved, so that you're able to query this object, and you basically decide what level you want to view the graph from, and then from that point on it can resolve everything down. At the moment it's a relatively flat object, but it won't be forever, and at some points there's going to be calls to multiple microservices to build that up. It's going to be dope. Basically you run a query, and then the query will tell you what it is that what am I saying? You've run the query will go on, figure out what it is that you want to know from the graph that you're trying to read, and then dynamically make calls to populate that object where it's needed. So if you've asked for a graph and you've asked for specifically dogs out of animal, you want pets, and you only want dogs that are pets, it'll go off and do all the calls necessary to do that. It'll ignore anything that's not a dog. It will. Oh, it's so cool. It's so cool. All I need to do now is actually implement all the microservices and interactions and whatnot, and then I'll do the pass-through. The pass-through isn't as easy as I thought it would be, though, because I've decided to let the API gateway decide. I may change the way that I do reference objects, to be honest with you, just so that the reference object, at the moment the reference object, there's a service fabric one, so that the API gateway can decide which microservice to go to. But if I do that, then I run the risk of struggling to proxy that if the API gateway is acting as a pass-through, which it will do when it's just on proxy mode. So I need to solve that problem. But even then, solving that problem is semi-difficult, because either all of the other objects have to know what the API gateway is expecting to stamp on the thing itself, or the API gateway needs to know how to read what it needs to read in order to do what it needs to do. So it needs to be able to understand what objects are going to be returned, and then rewrite the URLs that are acting as the reference on the fly. which may prove difficult. The not so interesting day as the development environment was down, but I'm back home. I am about to start jumping into my the actual like networking part of the API gateway. So I have it all working, and the GraphQL part is working to a point. I now need to start taking that and then pushing it over to my microservices so they're getting actual real data instead of just mock data, which is what it's currently doing. So that is the way that I'm rolling. Bang on with the naps. I've also just sorted out a video and it's going well. It's going well. I've really got nothing to report back from today at work. You know, I don't. Right, so, microservices. What I need to do is, I've already got my authentication stuff, so I need to figure out how I'm going to do the connections between, which shouldn't be too difficult actually, because we could just, because it is like all transiently done now, No, the difference is the credentials. My things are all authenticated. Right, so basically then, my microservices is publishing a Swagger document which describes how you interface with it. I have built a store, like a connection cache, so that I can keep hold of all the connections. In theory, that means I'll be alright. I need to test it in anger, see what it will do. But that should do what it does. I then get a request, GraphQL figures out what it needs to do, pumps it into a mediator command request, goes off, gets the response from the microservice, feeds it back, and it will do all the logic that it needs to do to figure out whether or not more stuff has to happen, i.e. do I need to go get more information from a different source, etc, etc. I'm not sure if I said, but I was getting this running, and I now have like example types that my microservices don't know exist, and all that kind of stuff. And it works, and it was so good, and I stopped programming this morning at about 5:15-ish. I normally go back for a nap at 5:30, and I was like, I'm going to quickly try and get this thing up and running because it's going to be so fucking great. And I got it running, and it was like 20:06, and I'm like, I need to go to bed because I need to have a nap before I go to work. It's been a while since, well, to be fair, it's quite often that semi-recently, it's been quite often that I'm picking up new stuff that I'm enjoying doing, and it's not just the same stuff again. So like I had my validation mapper, this thing is really cool, and it's just nice getting to play with stuff in a semi-legit realistic fashion, you know? Okay, so I took a deep dive through the APIs. It's kind of strange actually, GraphQL, because there's like a specification and then there's like the implementation. So I took a dive through the specification, saw what I thought it meant, and I was like, okay, cool, so I think it's going to act like this. Looked at the implementation of it, and then I'm like, why is it not doing what I expect it to do? So it's mildly strange, and it's basically because the error message is actually an exception. So I'm passing in like an exception, and it's just kind of swallowing it and just not showing me. So that's fine. I have figured out how it's doing. I'm trying to unit test it basically. I'm just trying to figure out what it does in errors, because I need to assert a couple of things inside the actual thing, and then before it gets to mediator basically, because otherwise it'll be completely blind. I'm figuring out a way of basically locking down the configuration of it without doing integration tests, and then I can do integration tests at a later date. But yeah, so I will power through that later. Otherwise though, we've come back from, Laura's come back, and we've watched some YouTube videos, and I've noticed, I'm not sure if I have a default version, like a beta version of this, but that right there is a YouTube story. Oh my god. Because let's be honest, we haven't got enough apps that need stories, am I right? But they're not called stories, they're called reels. Brilliant. In fairness, if I was to do stories on a map, it'd probably be YouTube. So I could turn my entire vlog into just a pure reels based temporary thing. That'd be crazy, wouldn't it? It'd be completely pointless. I said that I could do it on Instagram, but fuck it. I understand the concept of generating stuff that's like gone in 24 hours. What's the point? May as well not bother, right? May as well just, it's either good enough to stay there forever or not, you know? No comments about the quality of this vlog, please. Jesus. Well, it's quite a significant mind shift going from like building an API, a REST API at work, Like, we're trying to design a REST API to be as helpful and as easy to consume as possible. Like, GraphQL is like a completely different beast. Like, you're not supposed to... Like, there's no such thing as a not found. There's no such thing as a, like, bad request. Like, the query, in theory, compiles itself. So, in theory, you can't... The only thing that could be a bad request is, like, an invalid string input. But you can't tell the user that. It basically just spits back as a... Alright, no results. And it's like, really, like, I keep stepping back, being like, there must be a way of, like, telling the user why something went wrong. And it says, like, in the specification that, like, you can do, but it's not standard to explain why something didn't return any results, for example, say not found. And it's almost like the one thing you don't want to do is... Well, I'm like, no, that's the question that I keep going back to. Is, do I throw an exception? In what scenario do I throw an exception during the resolution of the query? Do I throw an exception if my microservice like gets in a tiz and doesn't know what I've... Say a 404, that isn't an exception. I figured that much out so far. If it throws like credentials issues, don't have authorization, how does that spit back? Is that the same? I should look that up actually. See, I'm just adding more things to this list. If it returns, I guess it will follow redirects. Oh god, it's a mess, man. It's quite difficult to figure out what's going on, to be honest. It's quite difficult indeed. Like I say, it's just such a mind shift. It's quite difficult to figure out what it means, because it is so different to everything else that you write, or everything else I've written so far. So we'll check the authorization edge case. Not found, you just return null. They're the most likely things to happen. Authorization and that. The rest of the case is going to be like hard exceptions, which will be thrown in theory in the microservice and then just thrown out to the user. I guess if I can't give them a helpful, if I can't tell them that something they did was wrong. I wonder if I get like a 422 invalid process, but it's a get, so why would you ever get a 422? Alright, so the only thing I really need to worry about then is the authentication. Any server error is a catastrophic server error, and I can't expect the user to be able to fix that. I'm going to do 5 more minutes of Googling and I'm going back to bed. I'm jump an entire day. It's been a really long day today. We just had like meetings and then we were doing interviews, and I ended up, I'm struggling to keep my eyes open because we ended up leaving late because we had to do an interview like towards the end of the day, and I'm like struggling to keep my eyes open. Hopefully tomorrow, well, in theory tomorrow I'll be able to go into test and I'll actually be able to write some code, but yeah, I don't think we've got any meetings tomorrow. Just like, what, are you crazy? But we've been kneecapped behind having a bad environment at the moment, which happens semi-regularly, but hopefully this should be the end of this one. I've got one more interview tomorrow to do, and that's in our like current batch of queued up stuff. And then what else? That's it, nothing really to report. Yes, I ended up getting back later than normal and then having to have a late nap and then a late dinner, and it kind of knocked me out of sync a little bit. I almost thought about the possibility of having a nap after work, at work, before coming home, and then in theory coming back in later traffic. But Laura says that if I did that, she'd be more likely to stay at work longer and then come back later. So I'm like, no. I woke up at 5:30. God damn it. Doing really well. It's like 5 days in a row, almost. Well, no, yeah, this was the 6th day, and I slipped. But it's alright. Carry on as normal, still nap. Launch into it the weekend, we'll get there. I'm the other way with my longboard, but I think it's a little bit too wet to go into work, but it will definitely be dry enough to come back, which is good. Because for some reason I've got an odd number of bus tickets. And I don't know how that happened, I don't know when, but I've had them for a long time, and I've always wanted a battery though, boy. Tad too greasy, I'd have to go on the road, and even the road isn't that dry. The path by the river would definitely be too wet. We do it later, boys, we do it later. And we're calling it there, ladies and gentlemen.
we are heading off to bed. We had a pretty good day today. We managed to get things into test, got things all deployed and all that kind of good stuff. We're definitely going to hit the sprint goal. I mean, we finished the sprint on Tuesday, but we're going to get it all signed off in test, which is good. In time for when it ends, coming Tuesday. It's been a good day. We went out for lunch as well. Went out to go get a big nice slab of cake, which was absolutely delicious. And well worth it, because I slept in this morning. I was like, I'll miss lunchtime, nap when I come home. And now we're heading to bed early. It's 10 o'clock, I'm like, what are we doing? We're bored. So, heading off to bed. I'm going to end the video here because we have an exciting weekend coming up. And because I'm tired now, I don't think I can stay up much longer. Which always happens when it like knocks me off kilter when I sleep all the way through. It's kind of a catch-22, because I sleep all the way through because I'm tired, and then I get more tired because I slept all the way through. But I'm like, all I want to do is just have a nice full night's sleep, and I'm like, you shouldn't, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed. Boy, nothing exciting going on. Nothing exciting going on. There's nothing to report at the moment. So I'll catch you later.